recording. It's 6 p.m. So we have started the recording of the first public hearing of the, two more people. I'm going to keep monitoring the waiting room so that we can admit people as they show up. We do have a few members of the public attending. It's 6:01, so I am going to get started with the agenda so we can stay on schedule and have time for public comment. Welcome to the first public hearing of the Chittenden Solid Waste District Draft 2020 Solid Waste Implementation Plan. The way it's going to work this evening is I'm Michelle Morris. I'm the Director of Outreach and Education for CSWD. And I'm going to walk through a very general overview of the SWIP. And Jen, there's something showing on the screen here. Oh, it's gone now. It might have been from my computer. I'm gonna walk through a general overview of the SWIP first, and that will take only about 15 to 20 minutes because I want to allow ample time for public comment after that. The full 20-page SWIP is available for viewing anytime on our website. We are also happy to provide it to anybody who wants a copy separate from that site, but it's downloadable as a PDF there. So again, this isn't going through it in detail. We're just going to do a quick overview so that we have time for public comment at the end. All right, so to begin, this is just an outline of how the overview is going to work. It will talk about the general purpose of a solid waste implementation plan, what it is, why it's required, why we're doing this, what the requirements in the SWIP are. Then I will show a summary of the public comments we've received so far through this process. I'll discuss what the next step is to final approval by the state of our SWIP, and then we'll allow plenty of time for public comment at the end. Okay, so what is a SWIP, a solid waste implementation plan? It's a very specific beast. It's required by state law, and it is a very specific prescriptive document that is in response to the state materials management plan. The State Agency of Natural Resources is required to update their statewide materials management plan every 5 years. And in response, every solid waste management entity, cities and towns or entities like the Chittenden Solid Waste District who manage the solid waste generation for our member cities and towns, we're required to update our SWIP in response to the requirements that are outlined in the MMP. The SWIP and the MMP are by no means comprehensive. So our SWIP, again, is very specific in response to that MMP requirement. But as I go through this presentation, I will try to highlight some of the few areas that I can here where CSWD actually does quite a few things that are outside the scope of the SWIP and beyond what the SWIP requires, as do many other entities offer things that are outside the SWIP. Okay. Here's the first step in what the SWIP specifically requires. I'm admitting someone else here as I talk. Oh, thank you for taking care of that. So the first step in what the SWIP requires is that it's about implementing policy and collecting and reporting data. Part of that is about variable rate pricing, which is sometimes also called pay as you throw, and it's to help incentivize people to produce less waste and more intentionally pay for what they do produce. It requires us to track and report disposal and diversion data. So disposal meaning going to landfill, diversion meaning kept out of the landfill by a variety of means. And I'll have a chart that I'll present at the end of this. That's not part of the SWIP, but it does talk a little bit more about how we're doing in Chittenden County with that disposal and diversion. And it has to include, the SWIP must include a process and standards for facility inclusion in our plan. So if somebody wants to create a facility or establish a business or a facility for managing solid waste or processing it, they have to apply for inclusion in our plan so that it's part of how we're operating in the district. Other requirements are largely a great deal of the SWIP addresses how we all must inform and educate our members about how we manage and it can reduce the solid waste generated in Chittenden County. So part of those requirements that are really spelled out in the materials management plan are that we have to maintain and provide hauling service info. So any business or resident in Chittenden County can go and see on our website what their options are for hiring a private service to pick up and manage their materials they're generating. We need to conduct residuals recycling meetings. So this is a new requirement in the 2020 SWIP, and we have to join in with the state and other stakeholders to conduct meetings that discuss how things like biosolids, so wastewater treatment facility byproducts, can be best managed in our district. It requires us to inform, educate, and assist very specific sectors within our district to encourage compliance with the SWIP goals. Those sectors that are spelled out include K through 12 schools, businesses and institutions, which also includes colleges, and events. And CSWD has staff devoted to each of those sectors to help those entities with their challenges and encouragement and technical assistance. Other ways we're required to inform and educate our members include the website, which I mentioned already. But there's specific details on what we have to put on our website. We do have all of this information that's outlined here on our website, as well as much, much more in addition to what is required. We're required to collaborate with food recovery organizations. This is like food shelves and soup kitchens to encourage the donation of quality food. So for instance, this is how CSWD does this, is when our business outreach coordinator is out there talking with restaurants and others, he's encouraging them to work with the food recovery organizations to think about how they can divert usable quality food to people in need and our neighbors instead of just sending it, for instance, to compost. Another requirement under the SWIP is that we must ensure regional collection opportunities for certain materials. Now, by collection opportunities, we simply mean that our members need to have a place where they can take these materials to ensure that they will be responsibly managed. It doesn't mean that CSWD has to have a facility, but in many cases we do. For instance, one of those material streams that we have to ensure is household and small business hazardous waste. And CSWD has been a leader in hazardous waste management with our full-time permanent environmental depot hazardous waste facility in South Burlington. We have to provide options or make sure in our district there are options for other state landfill ban materials such as batteries, fluorescent lamps, used oil, tires, electronics, appliances, paint, and propane tanks. And we do in fact have facilities where we accept all of these materials for appropriate and economical management. And then the last list is textiles, leaf and yard trimmings, clean wood, asphalt shingles, and drywall. Textiles, we had been pre-COVID accepting textiles at our facilities. They're still under consideration and we may be restarting that, but meanwhile, they are accepted at places like Goodwill. So we are continuing to ensure that those materials can be managed appropriately. We do accept leaf and yard trimmings, clean wood, and then at our Williston drop-off center, or our drop-off center that's located in Williston, we accept asphalt shingles like roof shingles and drywall for recycling. So that's the summary of what the SWIP itself specifically requires, the scope of the SWIP. In terms of public comments, we have been receiving public comments since May when we first publicized this and we brought those comments, the first round, to our board. We've received 2 additional comments in this round that came in through today. And as the summary notes, all of the comments we've received to date have actually been outside the scope of the SWIP. And what I mean by that is that they are very important observations and we take them very seriously. We value the input. It's just not items and topics that are addressed within the SWIP itself. As a summary of what those comments have been, 3 of the comments recommended efforts targeting packaging reduction and stewardship. We agree that this is an extremely important area. In fact, CSWD has been a leader in this area for more than a decade. Jennifer Holliday, who is running this presentation for me, was the founder and is currently chair of the Vermont Product Stewardship Council. And she, on behalf of CSWD, is working on packaging legislation right now. So it is something that we agree is important. Again, it's not covered by the SWIP, but it's something we're working on and have been for quite a while. 2 of the comments requested reuse facilities co-located at drop-off centers. 1 commented on combining recycling and trash fees in the hauler billing for residential services. This is actually something that is in state statute that we cannot change. It's a requirement that at the state level that haulers have to combine, wrap the billing for the recycling in with their fees for trash collection. And then the remaining comments covered the need for a local landfill, concern for human population control, and alternating. 1 appreciated CSWD operations during the COVID situation, and another had expressed disapproval of CSWD operations that had changed under COVID. So that's a summary of the public comments received to date. The next slide, I don't know if we can enlarge this a little bit. We'll give it a shot.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right, we'll get there. But what this colorful chart shows, thank you, great. This is the disposal and diversion chart that I referenced earlier. Basically what we're trying to show here is when I mentioned the data that we collect, that data that we collect on what people do with the stuff we all generate is what feeds this kind of information that we continuously track. So the pie chart at the very top with the blue, green, orange, and brown, and then the cross-hatched gray at the bottom, that represents all of the stuff that we all generate in Chittenden County only annually. And this was from calendar year 18. So that was the last data that we had. We're now getting ready to present calendar year 19 data to our Board of Commissioners in October. I'm sorry, I think it's tomorrow at our board meeting. So the top pie here, the colored parts is what was diverted or kept out of the landfill by one of those methods: recycling, organics, which could be composting or feeding to animals, special recycling, and then construction and demolition debris diversion. That's 61% of everything that was generated was kept out. The bottom 39% is the portion of that stuff that was generated that was sent to the landfill in Coventry. Okay, thanks, Jen. Now, of that portion that was landfill, that 122,000 tons that was sent to the landfill, this bottom pie chart represents what that was composed of, right? So 52% of it really did have to go to the landfill because there was nothing else that people could have done with that material. There weren't programs, there aren't facilities, there's no way to deal with it except landfilling. The other 48%, 10% of that could have been recycled in blue bins by regular recycling. 7% could have been diverted through special recycling. That's like for batteries and appliances and things like that. The green portion, that big green 25% wedge, that's what we call organics. That's food scraps, leaves and yard debris. That's why the state has phased in Act 148, and we're all now working on ways to keep food scraps out of the landfill, because it's such a big wedge of what people are still sending to the landfill. And then that last 6% was construction and demolition debris that ended up being landfilled. So those are opportunities. Those are the things that we can all still be working on, and that CSWD is still working on, trying to help our members understand that they can take advantage of existing programs and facilities to keep those materials out of the landfill. Thanks. So the next slide is the steps to getting approval for this SWIP. We're on this step that's highlighted right now, which is that we have 2 public hearings. So tonight and then next Wednesday, October 7th, we will be accepting comments through October 7th. So tonight at this hearing, next week's hearings, and then written comments as well. The next step after that is that we summarize the public comments again for our board, and we will be taking, we hope, we intend to take the draft SWIP with the comments to our board again in October at the Board of Commissioners meeting. And then if our board adopts it that night, which we would hope they will, we submit the adopted draft SWIP to the Agency of Natural Resources. That's what ANR is. And then the Agency of Natural Resources gives the final approval for our SWIP. All right, so now we're moving into the public comment phase of the evening events. And we are monitoring chat. So if anybody has made comments on the chat, I will be happy to respond to those now. Folks are welcome to unmute yourself if you want to share comments, or our host can unmute you. We can unmute you if you're not sure how to do that. If anyone has called in, I don't think we have anybody on the phone, but if we have any phone call folks, you can press *9 to let us know you'd like to speak, and then press *6 to unmute yourself, and you are welcome to offer your comments. All right, would any members of the public care to offer comments on the SWIP? I'm happy to also receive comments if folks are camera shy and don't choose to go on record on this Zoom. I'm happy to still receive those comments and summarize them via the website. We had posted the address, or you can email to plan@cswd.net. So if you go to that page, cswd.net/SWIP, that's where you can find the SWIP in its entirety, all 20 pages with all the details of how we're going to fulfill those requirements. And you can submit comments that way through a form, or you can send them again to the email. And again, comments will be accepted through October 7th, which is also going to be our second public comment hearing via Zoom, just like this one. I would love to share more information and more detail. So if someone doesn't care to have a comment, if you'd like to ask a question or would like more detail on anything, I'd love to use this time, since people have made the effort to come. I really want to be able to address any questions. All right. I am going to, since we still have folks in attendance, I'm going to take this opportunity, and I would invite anyone who changes their mind or decides they have a question or a comment to please interrupt me at any time. But I hate to waste airspace that I can use to inform folks about all the great things CSWD is doing. So Jen, would you mind please going back to that chart? Great, thank you. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to detail a little bit about what each of these segments is: blue bin recycling, organics diversion, special recycling, C&D diversion, and of course trash, and a little bit about the opportunities that we have and what is accepted in each of these areas, so that I again can just communicate that information. Well, we slipped there, I think, Jen. Thank you. All right. So I mentioned the blue wedge, 16% of everything that we're generating is what we call blue bin recycling. So we call it blue bin recycling because it's material that typically is collected in blue bins or blue carts with wheels, or even blue recycling dumpsters at businesses and big institutions. It goes to a very specific place called the Materials Recovery Facility that CSWD owns in Williston. And it is sorted by a series of machinery. And that's why we can only, as well as people actually there. And that's why we can only take certain things. We don't want any batteries. We don't want any scrap metal. We don't want computers and electronics and things like that. Those materials fall into this little orange wedge that we call special recycling. We do accept those in special, at our drop-off centers mostly, and other areas accept them as well, and they have to have special handling, but they don't belong in the blue bin. The blue bin is just for paper, cardboard, clean containers like bottles, cans, jars, dairy tubs, things like that. The special recycling includes any number of things, again, that can be recycled and go on to lead a great new life and be kept out of the landfill. Things like propane tanks, like I said, batteries, CFLs or other fluorescent tubes that need to have special management, but they can be recycled, just not in the blue bin. That green wedge that we're doing actually an even better job now as a community in keeping out of the landfill, thanks to Act 148, is what we call the organics. So most people that think of that as leaves, grass, yard debris, and yard trimmings, and then food scraps. So food scraps can be anything from meat, bones, vegetables, fruits, anything that was once living, we would consider potential food scraps. And then that big brown wedge is construction and demolition debris. So that's really recyclable construction and demolition debris, like wood, clean wood, shingles, concrete, things like that. And there are special facilities. There's the Myers Construction Demolition Waste Recycling Facility in Colchester that has been doing the lion's share of recycling that construction debris. And then really the only thing that belongs in trash is the stuff that we haven't yet solved as a community, and really as a country, for how to keep that out of the landfill. All right. Thank you for
Michelle,
letting me
do you want to Do you want to take the opportunity just to talk about our facilities?
Sure. Thank you, Jen. Yeah. So we have 7 drop-off centers that are located all around the county. They are all now reopened after our temporary closure and reconfigurations and reopening under COVID. The one in Burlington is open for food scraps only, as the most important material that we identified that Burlingtonians needed to manage in that area. The other facilities are mostly accepting the materials that they did accept previously, except now our Williston location is the place that you need to take things like appliances, tires, really large, bulky materials that the other facilities just really aren't set up to handle. We also have, as I mentioned previously, the Environmental Depot, which is our amazing hazardous waste facility, which handles the really most toxic and difficult to manage things like pesticides. I'm blanking here, Jen, help me out. Pesticides, they also take fluorescent bulbs.
Paint, lots of paint.
Right, so I was gonna mention paint as really its own beast.
Use motor oil, fluorescent bulbs, pesticides, cleaners.
Cleaners, toxic cleaners is a good one, thank you, yes.
Paint thinners.
Paint
gasoline,
thinners, right.
Old gasoline.
There you go. That's really your depot stuff. The paint program, it's really kind of separate. We accept it at the Environmental Depot, but we have a separate facility that's not open to the public where we triple screen it and filter it out and assess it. And that paint is turned into our local color paint, which we provide to anyone who wants to buy it. And it's amazing quality paint. I can attest to that because I used it myself on a garage with T111 siding, and it sprayed it on and it lasted for years. So it's a great way to participate in keeping that material out of the landfill. The paint that we can't turn into local color, then we are able to responsibly manage through that facility as well. Then the other facility that's getting a lot of attention these days because of Act 148, but we've had it going for quite a while, is the Organics Diversion Facility, which folks may previously have been more familiar as Green Mountain Compost. We're calling it the Organics Diversion Facility because it's does more, really, it's going to be doing more than just making compost. We're going to continue to make the high quality, wonderful soil amendment and compost that folks have come to know and love. We provide that now on a wholesale level to local stores for reselling and to landscapers and things, people like that. And we also have expansion in the works so that we can manage more materials. We're really at our limit for the food scraps we can compost, but we're going to continue to serve our members by keeping that material out of the landfill and doing more beneficial applications for that. Again, this is all stuff that's really outside the scope of the SWIP, but because I have the time here, I'm happy to have the opportunity to talk about all the things that CSWD does. And then apart from facilities, I don't think I've missed any, right? I covered them all. Well, we do own the materials recovery facility, which I mentioned earlier, which is where we process the recyclables that not just from Chittenden County, but from about half of the state, the northern half of the state, that businesses and residents and others generate. They come to us for processing, sorting, and marketing into new commodities and more materials. So the other aspect that I want to just give a shout out to that CSWD does that I'm super proud of as the area that I oversee is our outreach and education team. And that is a huge part of the SWIP requirement. And it's a huge part of what CSWD does for our community. I mentioned earlier when I went through the SWIP presentation that we provide staff that answer our hotline, that run our website, that do our social media, that answer user questions on a daily basis through our emails and through our social media and through the hotline. And then they also are now getting back out into the community under COVID safe precautions. We are also providing virtual outreach, virtual tours of our facilities, as well as webinars and workshops to help businesses, residents, events when they get started back up, understand what the opportunities are for keeping all this stuff out of the landfill and finding better ways to reduce it in the first place, you know, not to generate more stuff. And then what we do generate to make sure it's managed as responsibly as possible. All right, we're at 6:30. We've got 30 more minutes in our public meeting time.
So Michelle, one of the things that I want to point out or just talk about a little bit is some of the requirements in the SWIP. For example, household hazardous waste collection. From what I recall, we're statewide, any municipality that is charged with developing a SWIP, and some towns that do it on their own, but mostly it's solid waste districts like ourselves. They're required to provide, I think it is 4 household hazardous waste collection events per year. And these are just one day, typically a Saturday, for a few hours. It has to be a certain number of hours, I think maybe 4, that people can come and drop off their household hazardous waste. And so that is the level of which the state requires anybody who's responsible for solid waste implementation to meet. Is it 2?
It's actually 2 events.
Okay, so they decreased it in this last round of the materials management plan. They went from 4 events to 2 events because actually what's happening is because the limited service up in Vermont for household hazardous waste transportation and all the hazardous waste that gets collected gets transported out of state and managed. It's gotten very, very expensive for solid waste management entities like ourselves. So 2 events per year is what's required. And we actually have a year-round facility that's open 4 days a week to the general public, 1 day a week to the small businesses that generate hazardous waste every week of the year, which is an exceptional service.
It
really is. And, you know, we do get comments sometimes about the hours, or now we've turned to a by appointment system that's made the facility run much, much smoother, more predictable more safe for the operators. And it's a phenomenal program. It's recognized nationally as a phenomenal program in terms of its service, its participation, thanks to the Chittenden County residents and businesses that do participate and care about bringing their hazardous waste to the right place and managing it properly. And we're really proud of that. But that's just one example. And I know there's quite a few in the outreach and education department where we also are going really above and beyond what the SWIP requirements are in terms of this level of service for these requirements.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, Jen. And I have the actual SWIP open, and the new 2020 requirement is 2 events or access to a permanent hazardous waste collection facility that is open at least 1 day a week, a minimum from May through October. So they just have to have access to that. Our depot is open on average 255 days a year. And the program serves an average of 700 businesses and 9,500 households a year. So just to put an exclamation point on that participation and the accessibility of that program.
And that's been really important to our board to keep going and supporting because of its role in keeping the toxic material out of the waste stream. And Josh Esty, who is here, who manages that program, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that.
I don't. You did a phenomenal job touting the depot. I appreciate it.
You bet.
All right. Yes, and I would like to add something like around the food scraps. We do accept food scraps at all of our drop-off centers, not just at the Organics Diversion Facility or GMC. And I think folks don't realize that we've been doing that for well over a decade at our drop-off centers. And that's because CSW recognized long ago that it was important to provide these opportunities for our members to have a place to manage these materials when they couldn't do it on site or at their home. We are also continuing to again provide, in addition to the training and the workshops I mentioned, we're also providing bins, so backyard composting bins and green cone backyard digesters at our cost to our members, which is a significant discount from what folks can find them themselves. Because as a municipal district, we're here to serve our members and do it economically and efficiently and responsibly. Looking for other areas. And I would say we also have staff that just does research and development. We have RFPs that we put out to try to explore recycling of materials that are really hard to manage. And we have looked into things like mattresses, tires, and we're constantly monitoring things like the markets and what other states and nearby areas are doing so that we can stay on top of opportunities that may come up, because even though we looked into something 10, 15, 20 years ago when we started investigating some of these, markets change, opportunities, technology changes, and we have staff that stays on top of that. Again, that's not part of what the SWIP does, but it's part of what CSWD has deemed important, and our board has been very supportive of. It's just like Jen's work in product stewardship. That was an opportunity that she and CSWD identified early on and helped implement. Jen, can you highlight the product stewardship EPR programs that are available right now? Because I'm sure folks aren't aware of those.
Yeah, sure. So the concept which I started working on probably about 15 years ago is that the manufacturers of certain products, typically hard to manage products, such as electronic waste, paint, things that municipalities really struggle to keep out of the waste stream that cost a significant amount of money, the manufacturers should play a role in recovering any leftover or waste that's generated, their products at the end of their life, as we call it. They should play a role in recovering that material and making sure it's managed properly and ideally recycled. So we started working on this, as I said, about 15 years ago now. The first products that I was involved in bringing to the legislature was mercury containing devices like thermometers and thermostats. And then that moved on to electronic waste and paint, We have a product stewardship program for batteries. And these programs are all paid for by the manufacturer. So when CSWD collects paint, the manufacturers of paint pay for the proper management of that material, whether it's us processing it to make local color or shipping the oil-based paint out of state for fuel blending, used as fuels at a facility. All of that costs a tremendous amount of money, and the producers of those products are paying for that program statewide. One of the premises of all the laws that are in place for these products is that they're typically banned from the landfill, but not always. And that the generator of that product, the consumer who's dropping it off for recycling, doesn't have to pay anything. And that really encourages the proper management of that material. So whenever any of these laws have passed, we've seen an incredible uptick in the collection programs for them, because suddenly statewide people have outlets for them everywhere. It's not costing them anything. A lot of retailers will take back some of these products like fluorescent lamps,
Batteries.
and batteries. And we are, Vermont is actually, again, thanks to the awesome participation that we get from our residents and businesses in these programs, and because of the convenience standards that are written into statute, we are #1 in the country in terms of collection rates per capita for things like batteries, fluorescent lamps, electronic waste. We're just out there right in the front of the pack for recovering these materials, which, as I said, are either difficult to manage or they're toxic. You know, they're real priority products that we want to keep out of the waste stream. So we're moving into a much more complicated sector, which is packaging and printed material. But there's a lot of packaging out there, as everyone knows, that is not recyclable, difficult to recycle, or is actually what we call a disruptor. It causes problems in the recycling stream if people try to recycle it, such as plastic bags is one, maybe film pouches. So we're working on addressing those issues on packaging, and eventually someday we hope there will be a system in place. We do a great job in Vermont at recycling, and recovery rates are really good for recyclables, but there will hopefully be a system in place that will really encourage manufacturers to make packaging recyclable or reusable, or to actually reduce the amount of packaging that they're putting into the consumer marketplace.
Great. Thank you for that overview.
And others that are on the list that we consider, like you said, Michelle, tires, mattresses. Once people learn what extended producer responsibility or product stewardship is, they always come up with another like little pet peeve, and there's
carpet.
There's a huge list of things we could potentially work on, but there's only so much, bandwidth for the legislature, and we have to pick and choose priorities based on certain criteria to really go after.
Yeah, so that criteria, as you mentioned, would be things like toxicity.
Yep.
Right? Volume of it. How much is there that we're trying
cost,
to deal with?
Environmental, environmental impact.
Yeah, so one of the things regarding costs, right? So we talked about the environmental depot. which we spend something like $500,000 a year, I believe, on managing hazardous waste. Is that in the ballpark, I think?
It's actually, last I knew, and Josh can confirm this, it's 600,000, 700,000 net.
Yeah. Yep. It's around there.
Right. So these product stewardship programs are really key in helping defray those costs, because I do also want to point out that CSWD's funding, we do not receive any tax funding. Our funds are all from the tip fees that we collect from large generators that use our materials recovery facilities. So the hauling companies that bring recycling there, as well as hauling companies, again, that bring the food scraps to our organics diversion facility. And then user fees at our drop-off centers. So when you pay for a bag of trash, or for another special waste material that we need to manage, like a microwave or dehumidifier, the fees we charge are to cover our costs for managing those. And then there are certain materials that we've chosen to basically not charge a fee for, or charge a reduced fee, to encourage participation, to encourage people to bring them to us and keep them from being improperly disposed. And again, we have to decide how to make that budget work, and applying it to the most difficult to manage or toxic materials, like we do with the hazardous waste program that spends close to now $700,000 to properly manage those materials. Let's see. We've got 10 minutes to 7. We want to leave this opportunity open if anybody chooses to join us or make a comment. Let's see, I'm going through the SWIP. Like I did briefly mention that we do accept asphalt shingles and clean unused drywall at our location in Williston for recycling those materials. And that they can also go to the Myers recycling facility in Colchester.
I think we have someone who might want to comment.
Excellent, yes.
Yes, I'm Michelle, and I just thought I'd pipe in so you know I'm listening and let you know that we think CSWD does a great job. We mostly called in just to keep tabs on things because we appreciate all the work you all do to responsibly get rid of the waste we generate, which we try to generate as little as possible. We do appreciate all you did also during the COVID crisis. You guys did a great job. What? Cleaning up when you go to oh, yes. Yeah, the event stuff you do, event recycling is great. You know, maybe one question we've had in our years is, you know, what do you do with recycles that you don't have any facility to clean them out? You know, we've kind of wondered about that. I don't know if you want to comment on that at all.
event, and you can't rent it out.
Yeah. where you
Yeah,
Prints it out at an event. Yeah.
right. Sure, I'd be happy to comment on that if, unless you have other comments you'd like to make, and I'd be happy to comment on the event situation.
Yeah, I didn't have anything specific to the SWIP. Like I say, we just wanted to call in and just, do our part to understand what's going on in our solid waste district.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for chiming in here and your support and comments. We really do appreciate that because it's our members who make it work and support us. And we very much appreciate your interest and participation. And we need to hear from everyone. We always like hearing from the supporters, but we do want to hear from everyone. So in answer to your question about events, and I do want to mention, we're excited and eager, and our outreach coordinator, Robin Orr, is eager to get back to working with events when they get up and running again, and providing the Waste Warrior program, which you may have seen at any events. That's a dedicated group of over 100 volunteers that have signed up to help us monitor waste stations at events and help educate people and let them know. So we work with the event producers themselves to help them identify ways to reduce the materials people have to manage, right? So in answer to your question about how to manage that, what Robin does is she tries to work with, let's say somebody like, I'll give a shout out to Higher Ground because they've been such a great partner with us in their events. Work with them so that the vendors there, like the food trucks, are using either ideally creating food when they can that doesn't need a container or packaging, right? It's finger food. You can hold it in a paper towel or a napkin. And then if there's anything left, that whole thing can go in the food scraps or the compost bin.
Oh, yes.
Right. But if you do have something that needs to be recycled or can be recycled, if it just had liquid in it or a dry material, then you can just dump it out, shake out the crumbs, and it can still go in the recycling bin.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Great. But if it's something like a smoothie, that is really clean.
Oh, that's a good point. Yes.
Right. So that's a challenge for us. And we recognize that's a challenge at events. Some events have opted to go with certified compostable products.
Oh yeah, we've seen those. Not enough, but.
Yeah. So there's a number of reasons somebody might want to do that. They might choose that because it's not made from petroleum products. It's not a plastic.
Right.
And that's a preference for them. It's an environmental preference. If they choose to go with that certified compostable product for materials like a smoothie, let's say, then that can be put in the compost. And we do accept that at our organics facility where those materials come. But I should back up because the really preferable thing, if you can't eliminate packaging, is to use durables. And so I'll give a shout out to the, I think it's the Brewers Festival that went with a souvenir mug, right? So instead of having cups at every station, as part of your admission was your souvenir mug that you could then take from brewer to brewer and get a refill on that.
Oh, that's a good idea. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we work with events to do that. We work with schools to do that, to really encourage using reusable products and durables so that we folks have less of that dilemma. What do I do with this thing when it's too dirty to recycle? Because you're right. If it has goo all over it, we can't take it for recycling because it's that's contaminated. Yep. And nobody wants to buy it and we can't wash it. Right.
And some of the reason we know some of these things, by the way, is because we're on your email list and we read up. I try to read up monthly on some of the things that are published. What's that, Amy?
I've been on a tour.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Amy was on a tour of the materials recycling facility.
Yeah.
Yeah, your education is fantastic. Like I've learned a lot at just following some of the links when I am able, I can't read everything, but
Sure.
follow some of the links, and the education piece is primo, and even when I don't know what to do with something, the A to Z list is great. Just look it up and figure it out. So keep
Great.
it up. Keep up the good work. It's great.
Well, we'll do our best, and thank you very much. And thank you to everybody who attended. And I thank you for chiming in, Ken and Amy. I hope that I got that right.
Yep.
Okay. Again, we appreciate your participation and your support, and we look forward to when we can get back there and be offering those tours in person again. We can offer them at the Green Mountain Compost or Organics Diversion Facility, but we cannot do it at the MRF, the Materials Recovery Facility for recycling right now, because it's just too close an environment, and we can't risk exposing the workers there, and we can't maintain the social distancing that we would need to keep everybody safe, the workers and the participants. So we look forward to doing that again someday in the future. And
I actually attended a virtual one recently. So.
Oh, okay. That's a great alternative, right? And we are going to be offering more of that sort of thing. So, what we found, the silver lining, right, out of this unfortunate situation, this awful situation, is that it's forced us to look at new and innovative ways to serve members. And the benefit of a virtual tour is it brings the MRF or the Green Mountain Compost to people kids who are too young, that, we have to have folks who are 10 and older. So if you're under 10, now you can see the MRF, or people who might otherwise not be able to have mobility challenges, right, or not be able to attend that. So we're really excited about what we've learned and opportunities we see in the future for bringing our facilities and our programs to an even broader audience. So
Great,
thank you again. Yep. I'm about ready. It's 6:58. I think we can probably sign off here. I don't, would you agree? I'll give one last shout out to anybody who wants to comment or join. I thank staff who attended, and I thank folks who made the time in their evening to come and listen to us expound on all the ways CSWD serves our members. All right.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you,
Michelle.
Jen. You're welcome. Thanks, John, for help.
Good evening.
Have a good night.